The first light of day poured golden honey onto the weathered roof tiles of the wooden house, nestled in the Virginia countryside. Vast barley fields stretched out quietly, rustling with the morning breeze, while sparrows chirped busily on the old wooden fence, as if celebrating a calm, gentle morning. From the kitchen, the faint aroma of freshly baked apple pie floated through the steam, mingling with the scent of blooming lavender around the porch, creating a tender scene no city air could ever offer. On an old wooden chair on the porch, 6-year-old Emily Carter, with blonde pigtails, sat swinging her legs, hugging her worn-out teddy bear named Buddy. Her tousled hair still bore the marks of interrupted sleep, and her eyes sparkled with innocent excitement, curiosity, and dreamy wonder, the kind of light only children who still believe all good things are possible can carry. "Grandma, can I go outside to play?" Emily's voice rang out brightly from the kitchen, where Grandma Margaret carefully dusted flour over the wooden table to knead a fresh batch of bread. Her hands moved slowly but surely, the wrinkles etched by time, but her eyes were affectionately soft as she looked at her granddaughter. "Yes, but remember what I told you, Emily," she said slowly. "Don't wander off the yard. This farm may seem peaceful, but it hides things you might not expect. There are snakes in the grass, a deep pond behind the willows, and old barbed wire fences rusted and sharp. Don't let your curiosity lead you where you're not ready to go." Emily nodded eagerly, her tiny feet bouncing as if counting the seconds to freedom. To her, Grandma's words were like background music to a promising morning. Not a serious warning. She had no idea that just a few hours later, those words would echo hauntingly with every breath and heartbeat. The wooden door creaked open, that familiar sound setting her free. Emily darted outside like a little breeze trailing giggles behind. The green grass beneath her feet was soft, like nature's silk carpet, and the sunlight seemed to gently pat her shimmering hair. She chased aquamarine butterflies, collected oddly shaped stones, and now and then knelt to whisper to tiny ants. From the kitchen window, Grandma Margaret watched her granddaughter's silhouette, her gaze a mix of love and a quiet unease. Deep in the heart of the old woman stirred a sense of unrest, a vague premonition that sometimes the most profound things arrive in the most innocent moments. Neither of them knew that just over the hill, a few steps away, another life was lying silently in pain. A pregnant German shepherd hung suspended on an old barbed wire fence, her body limp and bleeding, with drops of blood soaking into the cracked earth below. No cry could escape her. Only shallow, broken breaths and weary eyes remained. On what seemed like an ordinary summer day, the paths of a 6-year-old girl and a dying mother dog were about to cross. And in that fragile moment, between an unspoken promise and a life desperately waiting to be saved, a miracle would begin to bloom. The wind still whispered across the fields, carrying the scent of dried grass and sun-warmed lavender, as if nature itself were trying to lull all disturbance beneath a peaceful facade. In that quiet setting, Emily Carter was still chasing sunbeams that danced across the ground, her tiny hands catching floating specks of dust, her bare feet stamping fleeting prints in the soft grass before the breeze erased them again. From the kitchen window, Grandma Margaret continued watching, a trace of nostalgia in her eyes. Maybe in that running figure, she saw a glimpse of herself. Once mischievous, curious, once believing the world was a harmless place. But life had taught her otherwise, and now she carried those memories as warnings, hoping her granddaughter would learn about limits before pain ever found her. "You can only play in the yard, Emily," she had warned earlier. "Don't go past the old oak and do not go to the hill beyond. It's not safe there, understand?" Emily had nodded solemnly, as if she truly did. But children, and the pure compassion within them, are hard to restrain with rules. She was playing near the old well when something drew her gaze toward the old oak at the yard's edge. The tree, Grandma always said, marked the start of wild land. Overgrown grass, Maybe snakes, abandoned machines, and fences sharp as knives. But today, the wind behind the oak carried a different sound. Not quite leaves, more like something scratching at her heart, a nameless pull that made her chest flutter. Maybe it was a sound, or just a strange feeling, as if someone out there needed her. Emily glanced back at the kitchen. Through the foggy window, Grandma was dusting cinnamon on a loaf of bread. She didn't see Emily. She didn't see the line her granddaughter was about to cross. "I'll just look for a second," Emily whispered, half to herself, half to ease the creeping guilt. And so those tiny feet began to move toward the oak, slowly at first, as if soft steps wouldn't count. Then faster, faster still, until the tree's shadow covered her and she had left the allowed land behind. The grass here was taller, wilder, and the slope behind the tree rose like a silent invitation. Emily climbed the hill, her heart racing, not from fear, but the thrill of discovery, of entering a world she wasn't supposed to know. At the hilltop, she paused, shielding her eyes to see the other side. The place Grandma never spoke of with warmth. The place she'd been told held nothing worth seeing. And then she heard it. A faint sound, like a stifled breath, soft and weary. Not a bird, not a wild animal. Something about it was human. She quietly parted the tall grass and saw it. A German shepherd, hanging limply on a barbed wire fence. Its back legs were tangled in rusted coils, brown and gold fur torn by hooks like fishing barbs. Blood streaked its back and sides. Its heavy body made the fence groan with each small twitch. But what made Emily freeze was its swollen belly, pregnant, maybe ready to give birth, maybe already in labor, writhing in pain. But its eyes, those eyes held no anger, no wildness, only a direct, aching gaze, silently begging. Emily had heard all the warnings about strays, rabies, about never approaching. But in that moment, all of it melted away. What broke through was pure compassion, like a river finally finding its path to the sea after being dammed for too long. "What happened to you?" Emily whispered, tears welling as she saw the torn skin and blood seeping into the dry soil. "I won't hurt you. I just want to help." The dog, shaking, exhausted, still looked at her intently. A small whimper escaped, as if it, too, wanted to believe in the gentleness it now saw. No growling, no flinching, only one thing still clear in her, the will to live, to give birth, to be saved. And Emily, with the raw instinct of a child who didn't yet understand the world's complexities, knew she couldn't walk away, not today, not from this creature. Even if she had made a promise, even if Grandma would be angry, even if thunder was already rumbling somewhere in the distance. Because the easiest promise to break is the one that doesn't come from the heart. And the eyes of that dog, the mirror reflecting Emily's compassion, had already planted a new promise in her, one not spoken aloud, but rooted deep within, that she would return, that she would do something, no matter what. And in that moment of seemingly endless silence, the soft whimper came again, pulling Emily back to the present. A breeze carried the sound like a thin wisp of smoke, faint yet impossible to ignore. It froze her in place, her whole body tense as if bracing for something unknown. The sound wasn't fierce, nor panicked. It was more like a whisper from the depths of pain, patient to the point of despair. And perhaps only a young heart like Emily's, unburdened by adult reasoning, untouched by fear and caution, could truly hear the life knocking gently through such a fragile sound. She parted the tall grass, slipping through a narrow path between thick, thorny bushes, her tiny legs scratched and bleeding. But Emily didn't stop. She crouched low, following the sound like she somehow knew each step was taking her closer to something important. Not just for the creature calling out, but for herself, too. Then she saw it. Hidden behind a patch of wild brush and a dip in the ground was a female German shepherd, caught in the rusted coils of barbed wire. Her entire hindquarters were entangled, twisted metal spikes piercing through fur and flesh, forming wounds that slowly bled bright red. Her back legs couldn't move. Her body hung sideways in an impossible position, exhausted and breathless from pain. But what left Emily speechless wasn't just the wounds. It was the dog's belly, round and gently moving like a silent heartbeat. She was pregnant, and the little lives inside, also trapped, yearning for a chance to live. "Oh my God!" Emily stepped back, her hand covering her mouth, but her gaze was locked, held by the dog's eyes. They no longer had the strength to bark or plead through action, but still held a flicker of fire. Faint, but not gone. In those eyes there was intelligence and pain. But what made Emily cry was the trust, as if the dog were saying, "You came?" Someone finally came. The little girl knelt, her knees brushing the damp earth. "What's your name?" she whispered, trying to keep her voice as gentle as possible. "I'm Emily. I won't hurt you. I'm going to help." The dog didn't growl. She just panted, each breath like pushing through 100 knives. One ear drooped, the other twitched slightly at the sound of Emily's voice. Her front paw scraped weakly at the dirt, a feeble gesture but a sign of life all the same. Emily slowly moved closer, keeping enough distance to be safe, just as her mother had taught her about approaching injured animals. That's when she saw the frayed leather collar with a tiny metal tag caked in dirt and blood. She leaned in to read it, mouthing the letters. "Sasha." "Your name's Sasha?" Emily whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "That's a beautiful name. Don't be scared. I'm going to help you. I promise." Sasha didn't answer, but her heavy eyelids blinked slowly, and her nearly limp tail gave a small twitch, an exhausted but willing nod. At that moment, Emily had nothing in her pocket but a crumpled tissue and a leftover piece of sandwich from breakfast. She tore the soft bread, gently placing it near Sasha's paw, then stepped back. Sasha sniffed it, then swallowed it in one gulp, as if instinct was fighting for any last chance to survive. "We can do this, Sasha," Emily whispered, her eyes locked on the raw wounds and tangled wire. "I'll come back, I promise. But first I have to find something to get you out." She stood, her heart swirling with feelings she'd never known before. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from the sudden weight of something growing inside her. A sense of responsibility. A 6-year-old who'd never thought she could carry the fate of another living being was now holding on to the gaze of a mother dog trapped in pain, and a promise she couldn't break. As Emily turned away, her steps no longer belonged to a wandering child. They were the steps of someone who had heard a calling, a quiet but powerful cry, from beyond the hill, from deep inside, from a place where innocent lives begged for one more chance. And that was when the story truly changed course. This was no longer just a summer break. It was the beginning of a journey of a small heart learning how to become a refuge for something greater than itself. When Emily came back, her feet muddy, her tiny t-shirt damp with sweat and the first drops of early summer rain, she carried with her the rest of the sandwich and an old handkerchief from her pocket. In her mind, the image of those eyes still echoed, eyes that said nothing but held everything: pain, longing, and a fragile spark of hope amid hardship. She didn't know what she could do, but one thing was clear to her young heart. Sasha, the name etched into that faded metal tag, needed her more than ever. She made her way back through the grass, tracing broken twigs underfoot, and her heart nearly broke when she saw Sasha still there, hanging limp in pain, her body sagging lower, like a branch battered too long by the wind. But when Sasha saw her return, something flickered in her eyes. Not strength, but confirmation. The girl hadn't abandoned her. And to a creature lost in the wild, that meant everything. Emily knelt slowly, keeping her voice soft as a breath. "I'm back, Sasha. Are you okay? I brought you some food. It's peanut butter and jelly. My mom says dogs can have a little and it's safe." She carefully tore the sandwich into small pieces, tossing each a bit closer. At first, Sasha didn't respond, just panted, eyes locked on Emily as if deciding whether to trust again. But after a few minutes, when the first piece landed near her front paw, her black nose twitched. She tilted her head, stretched out her neck, and gulped it down like it was the first real food she'd had in days. Emily smiled softly, her tiny hands unwrapping more of the sandwich, tossing bite-sized pieces one at a time, closing the space between them. Each time Sasha took a bite, Emily inched forward, as if she were learning to breathe in sync with the creature before her. Sasha had stopped whimpering, though heavy breathing still escaped her now and then. Whenever that happened, Emily kept talking, telling stories about her mom being a vet, how much she loved dogs, how she only had a goldfish at home and always dreamed of having a fluffy friend to play with. She didn't know if Sasha understood, but somehow, the gentle tone seemed to calm her. Sasha's tail gave a faint thump when Emily said her name again, like a quiet yes. "Your name is so pretty," Emily said, and for the first time, she reached toward the collar. Sasha didn't growl, didn't flinch, only tilted her head so Emily could read the faded engraving more clearly. "Sasha, if lost, please call Dr. Ben Harper." Below it was a phone number, but the last 2 digits were smudged beyond recognition by dirt and time. Emily read it over and over, trying to burn it into her memory. In that moment, she realized Sasha once had a home, had been called by a loving name, had belonged to a world that now seemed far, far away. When Emily gently touched Sasha's head, something magical happened. Sasha didn't pull away. Instead, she closed her eyes, leaning into the little hand as if it were an anchor in a sea of pain. And in that silence, an unspoken promise formed, a wordless pact between 2 hearts, a bond beyond language. Emily took a deep breath, raising her eyes to the barbed wire digging into Sasha's back legs. She knew she couldn't free her alone. The twisted hooks had buried deep into skin and muscle, and one wrong move could make everything worse. But that didn't stop her. That 6-year-old had already crossed the threshold of fear. Now, there was only Sasha, and the tiny lives still squirming inside her, fragile sparks waiting for a hand to reach out and save them. Beneath the tree canopy where shadows swayed, the wind brushed softly through the tender grass. In that dim clearing, Emily sat motionless beside Sasha's limp body. Her tiny hand rested gently on the dog's forehead, a final connection between 2 lives bound together by a fragile, miraculous trust. Sasha tilted her head slightly, eyes still half closed, but the faint nuzzle into Emily's palm spoke volumes. It was as if every last defense had fallen away, making space for absolute faith. Emily leaned in closer, her small face clouded with worry. She whispered, her voice trembling like a flame flickering in a storm. "I'll come back for you. I promise." That sentence, when it broke the silence, wasn't just a child's vow. It was a pact, deep and heavy, between a little girl learning how to listen to the quiet cries of the world and a creature entrusting its very survival to the weakest, softest hands. Sasha didn't move, but that simple gesture, the gentle nudge of her head into Emily's hand, was enough. Emily understood. She had been heard, felt, and believed. She rose to her feet, backing away step by step, never taking her eyes off the wounded body. Sasha watched her go. Ears drooped as if swallowing her tears. Every step away tore at Emily's heart, but she knew, if she didn't leave now, Sasha would never be saved. The wind picked up as Emily ran. Her small legs flew downhill, slicing through the air, darting past branches, past the echo of all the warnings Grandma Margaret had given her. But all those fears were dwarfed now by the image of the dog hanging in that wire trap, and the tiny unborn lives still cradled in her belly, lives that had never touched the earth. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She knew that if she did, she might not have the strength to keep going. But in her heart, The image of Sasha's eyes remained, eyes full of pain, yet not entirely without hope. There was still a glimmer, like the final flame in the darkness, and Emily knew that if she didn't return in time, that light would vanish forever. When the kitchen door creaked open and the wind chime rang out her return, Grandma Margaret spun around. But before any scolding could begin, Emily cried out between gasps, "Grandma, there's a dog! It's stuck in the wire fence behind the hill. It's hurt bad, and it's going to have puppies." Margaret froze. Her face stiffened, partly from the words, partly from the raw urgency in her granddaughter's eyes. She didn't even have time to respond before Emily grabbed her hand, pleading, "We have to help her, Grandma, right now." The kitchen light shone on Emily's face. Drenched in sweat, her hands caked in dirt, her eyes red but burning with a startling resolve. Margaret realized something had changed. Within just 1 hour, the child she had loved and cautioned now stood before her like a protector, like someone who had grown through her own heart. "Slow down, Emily. Tell me clearly," Margaret said. But Emily couldn't slow down. Every second might be the difference between life and death for Sasha. She spoke fast, tugging her grandmother toward the door, pointing. "I know where she is. I remember the way. She's a German shepherd. Her name's on the collar. Sasha. She's having babies. She can't wait." Margaret checked the time. The sun was sinking. Outside, gray clouds were rolling in. She hesitated, torn between adult caution and the urgency burning in the child's voice. But then, something in Emily's eyes made her pause. Something deeper than responsibility or fear. She nodded slowly. "Get the raincoat and my gardening gloves. Show me the way." Emily didn't need to be told twice. She bolted to the hook, yanked down the coat, shoved the gloves in her pocket, and rushed out the door with her grandmother. The same house she thought would be her quiet summer haven, now just a backdrop to something far more important. One thing echoed in her mind. The promise. A promise to save a life. And she knew from this moment on, everything that followed would revolve around that vow, between a 6-year-old girl and a soul desperately clinging to life. The first gust hit as they were halfway across the field, carrying with it the heavy scent of rain and earth. Emily looked up at the sky as it shifted color, clouds folding into thick, brooding layers. The air grew tight and breathless, as if the world itself were holding still before a storm. She turned to Grandma Margaret, worry blooming on her face. But before she could speak, a lightning bolt slashed across the sky, followed by a sharp crack of thunder that froze them both in the open. "Back to the house, now!" Margaret shouted over the wind, gripping Emily's hand and pulling her toward the farm. "But Sasha, Grandma!" Emily cried, trying to resist but no match for the firm arm that had tended this land for half a lifetime. "She needs me, right now! She's in pain and the puppies—" "No more arguing, Emily. The storm's breaking, can't you see?" Margaret's voice was firm, but beneath the anger was something else. Fear. "There's nothing we can do in this weather. We have to go back." Emily stumbled beside her, tears streaming down in frustration. She looked over her shoulder, the hill vanishing in the haze of oncoming rain, the helpless feeling growing sharper in her chest. In her mind, she saw Sasha again. Those wet eyes, those drooped ears, the whimpers every time the wire tore deeper into her skin. She could almost feel that trembling nudge again, that quiet plea pressed into her palm. By the time they reached the warm kitchen, the rain had unleashed its fury. The porch trembled under the wind, thunder cracked across the fields, and lightning flashed in erratic bursts. Emily was soaked through, her feet caked in mud, her eyes bloodshot, and her hands still clinging to the gardening gloves she hadn't had a chance to use. Margaret rushed to dry her off, draping a towel over her shoulders and scolding as she rubbed her arms. "What were you thinking, running off like that? I've told you how dangerous it is to go out there alone. That hill is no place for a child." But Emily didn't answer. She panted, biting her lip to hold back sobs. Then, after a moment, she spoke, her voice shaky but fierce. "Grandma, the dog, she's hanging in the wire, her back legs are caught, and she's going to have her babies. Her name is Sasha. It's on her tag." Margaret paused. The scolding died in her throat. In the silence that followed, perhaps she saw a memory of her younger self, years ago, facing down a storm beside an animal that fought to live. She sighed, brushing the wet hair from her granddaughter's forehead. "Are you sure she's not a stray?" she asked, voice lower. "She could be dangerous. Or sick." "She's not dangerous, Grandma," Emily said through tears. "She was scared at first, but then she let me touch her. I fed her sandwich bits. She ate them. I saw her name, Sasha, on a leather collar. She had someone once, someone who loved her. But now no one's coming for her. Just me." Margaret pressed her lips together, doubt giving way to concern. "You said she's giving birth?" "Yes. Her belly's huge, and she was groaning. I saw her stomach tightening. She's having contractions out there, in the rain." Emily looked up, desperate. "Grandma, we have to do something." Margaret walked to the landline. She hesitated, then dialed. After several rings, she spoke briefly with the dispatcher at Animal Control. Emily stood nearby, fists clenched, hanging on every word. "There's a pregnant German shepherd caught in barbed wire on the west side of the field. She's injured, possibly in labor." "Yes, I understand. Thank you." She hung up and turned to Emily. "They said they'll send someone, but only after the storm passes. Might take a few hours." "A few hours," Emily whispered, her knees buckling. "Grandma, Sasha can't wait that long. She's out there, dangling in that fence, and her babies. What if they're born in the rain? Please!" "No, Emily," her grandmother said, conflicted. "We can't go out in this storm. It's too dangerous. I know you want to help, but we have to know our limits." Emily bowed her head, lips tight to hold back the cry in her throat. Inside her, another storm was raging, louder than the one outside, the storm of a broken promise, of a life she'd vowed to protect slipping further from reach. She didn't want to defy her grandmother, but she also couldn't forget Sasha's eyes. Thunder roared again. Wind howled through the trees. Rain battered the window panes, and deep inside the little girl's chest, a decision was quietly taking root, silent but unstoppable. She had made a promise, and some promises, once spoken, cannot be swept away, not even by a storm. Under the old wooden eaves of the kitchen, rain hammered rhythmically on the roof tiles, echoing the storm inside Emily's chest. She sat frozen on the stool, eyes fixed on the fogged-up window pane where flashes of lightning lit up the sky, bright, then gone, leaving behind streaks of darkness like cuts across the heavens. Inside her, another storm brewed, not of thunder and clouds, but of feelings she didn't yet have words for. Fear, guilt, the sound of Sasha's pain still pulsing like a drumbeat through her chest. And above all, one voice that refused to be silenced. The promise. "I'll come back. I promise." Those words no longer belonged to a naive 6-year-old. They were a red thread tying her to fate, a small flame in her heart, growing stronger the more it was beaten by wind and rain. Grandma Margaret was still in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup with her back turned, unaware that her granddaughter sat like a silent shadow at the edge of a storm. No more crying, begging, or pleading. Emily was preparing in silence. She rose quietly, tiptoeing toward the old wooden corner that led to the tool shed. She remembered the brown backpack, once used to carry duck feed. She took it down, set it on the table, and began gathering supplies with surprising focus and determination, almost as if even she didn't recognize the strength she now moved with. First came the first aid kit. Emily opened it, grabbing familiar items from past scraped knees, gauze, antiseptic, small scissors. She wrapped them carefully in a dry cloth before packing them, so rain wouldn't ruin them. Next came the old blue sports bottle. It was worn but clean. She added dry towels and a pack of cookies her grandma had saved for tea. Emily knew Grandma would be upset, but Sasha needed them more now. The hardest part was the fence cutters. They hung high on an iron hook by the tool cabinet. Emily had to climb the stool, stretch with both hands, and use all her strength to pull them down. They were heavy, cold, and bigger than she expected. But holding them, she felt courage seep quietly into her veins, as if the tool wasn't just steel, but a weapon for a mission that couldn't wait. She slung the backpack over her shoulders. It was heavy, but Emily didn't hesitate. She was ready. She opened the back door, where wind howled through the trees, and rain slammed the porch like a warning. One last time, she looked back, at her grandma's back, still hunched over the soup pot, unaware that her granddaughter was about to cross the threshold of safety. A small hand pushed the door open. Wind blasted through like an invisible wall, stinging her face, matting her wet hair to her forehead. Her coat soaked through almost immediately. But Emily didn't flinch. She bent low, bracing herself, pushing forward against nature itself, like a baby bird hurling itself into the storm. The path to the hill was now a muddy swamp. Every step sucked at her shoes, but each one also added weight to her resolve. In her mind, there was no thunder, no rain, only one image. Sasha, still trapped, belly swollen, life trembling on the edge. She had made a promise, and she would keep it. She followed the line of old poplars, gripping the backpack straps, blinking against the rain stinging her eyes. The storm soaked her through. Her cheeks were red from wind and cold, but she pressed on. She didn't know how long she walked, but when the old oak tree finally appeared through the mist like a giant silhouette against a purple sky, she knew she was close. The hill was a mess of slippery mud and wet leaves. She slipped the first time, her knee stinging, but instead of crying, she stood up, brushed herself off, and kept climbing. She fell again, face down this time, cheek grazing the cold earth. She closed her eyes for a moment, then rose, wiped her face, and continued. And then, through the curtain of white rain, she saw what her heart had memorized in perfect detail. Sasha, the German shepherd, her soaked fur clinging to her trembling body, heaving with each contraction, mouth panting, eyes cloudy with pain, yet wide open, as if waiting for this exact moment. "Sasha," Emily whispered, voice shaking with cold and emotion. The drooped ear twitched. The limp tail gave a faint shake. And in those wet eyes, Emily saw not just life, but belief. Belief in a promise. Belief in a tiny human who had returned through a storm to carry the hope of another species. Between life and death, wild and tame, stranger and friend, something miraculous was unfolding. And Emily knew, from this moment on, she was no longer just a 6-year-old girl. She was the keeper of a promise, the hand of hope, the one willing to do what even grown-ups sometimes couldn't, risk everything for a voiceless life. In the fleeting flash of lightning, Emily slid down the hill, her knees caked in mud, her palms burning from fall after fall. But she felt none of it, only the pounding of her heart. Sasha still lay there, a silent figure now nearly part of the earth around her. But something had changed. A new sound rose beneath the rain. Not a whimper, but a faint whine, so soft it nearly vanished in the wind. Emily stopped. Beneath the tangled, muddy grass, just inches from Sasha's side, was a tiny, curled creature. Silent. Soaked. A newborn puppy, smaller than both of Emily's hands put together. Its thin fur stuck to its cold, motionless body. Eyes sealed. Not moving. Emily froze, her heart clenched tight. No time to think. No room for fear. She dropped to her knees, hands trembling as she pulled a dry towel from her pack, wrapping the fragile life gently, urgently. Her hands moved on instinct. No one had taught her what to do, but something deep inside did. Rub gently. Bring warmth. Call life back from the edge. "Stay alive," she whispered, breathing warm air onto the puppy as she rubbed. "You have to live. Sasha's waiting." The towel soaked quickly with water and mud, but Emily didn't stop. She switched hands, angles, pressing the puppy close to her chest, rubbing, whispering lullabies, though she herself was shivering from cold and fear. Sasha, still tangled in barbed wire, turned her head toward them, her eyes full of pain and hope. No longer a wild animal, now a mother. Powerless, aching, but watching. And then, it happened. A sound, barely a peep, like a raindrop bursting on a leaf, came from the bundle in Emily's hands. Then the puppy stirred, its tiny body twitching, its mouth opening in a weak but defiant cry. Emily burst into tears. Not from fear, but from what she had just done. She had pulled life back to the world. In that moment, she didn't need anyone to tell her she'd done the right thing. That little cry, that faint warmth, was the only answer she needed. "You're amazing," she whispered, placing the puppy near Sasha's muzzle. Sasha immediately lowered her head, licking the newborn with a trembling tongue. It was instinct, pure and powerful, stronger than pain, stronger than wire, stronger than the storm. A soft whine rose from Sasha's throat, not of agony, but gratitude. Emily knew then. Something unnamed had ignited here, something close to a miracle. Rain still poured. The barbed wire was still sharp and cold. But amid all that cruelty, a tiny warmth had taken root, in the hands of a 6-year-old girl, and the heart of someone who refused to give up. Emily wiped her bangs from her face, breathing hard, her hand resting gently on Sasha's back. A promise of calm. She wasn't done. This was only the beginning. Sasha was still trapped. More puppies might be coming, and time would wait for no one. Emily looked up at the fence. Her eyes no longer held fear, but the fire of someone ready for a real fight. And she knew, whatever happened next, she would not leave again. Not while life depended on her hands. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and blood. Thunder rumbled like a war drum beating time. Rain poured harder than ever from the dull gray sky, lashing against Emily, plastering her hair to her forehead. But her brown eyes didn't blink. They stayed locked on the barbed wire twisted tightly around Sasha's hind legs, as though the mother dog's life was woven into every breath, every decision the little girl made. Emily pulled the bolt cutters from her backpack. Her hands trembled from the cold, the pain, and the sheer weight of the tool, heavier than anything she'd ever lifted. The rough iron handle bit into her soft skin, but she didn't care. In front of her, Sasha, soaked, shivering, was trying to stay still, not to hurt her pups. Her pained eyes looked straight into Emily's, trusting her completely. "We're getting out of here. Both of us," Emily whispered, her voice nearly lost to the cold. "You can't give up. I won't leave you." She picked the first spot. A strand of barbed wire wrapped around Sasha's ankle, already deep in the flesh, bleeding steadily. Emily carefully slid the blades beneath the wire, afraid of hurting Sasha more, but needing enough grip to cut. She squeezed with everything she had. Nothing. Gritting her teeth, she leaned in, shoulders shaking, arms straining, until finally, snap. A sharp metallic crack cut through the downpour. The first strand broke. Sasha let out a sharp yelp, jerking her leg in reflex, blood spurting from the freed wound. Emily pulled back, startled. Her own hands were bleeding now, the metal having sliced into her palms. But it was Sasha's small, trembling whimper that cut deeper. The mother dog shook, eyes clouded with pain and fatigue. But still, they never left Emily's. "I'm sorry, but I have to keep going," Emily sobbed, wrapping a dry cloth around her hand. "Just a little more. I promise." She moved to the second wire, this one deeper, wrapped around the joint. Sasha's fur was matted with blood, making it harder to see. Rain poured down harder, the cutters slick in her hands. Emily wiped them dry, crouched low in the wet grass, and squinted through the storm to find the right angle. This one was harder. She braced her knee against the ground, put all her weight into the tool. Sweat and rain blurred her vision, but she didn't stop. Her thin arms trembled with effort, her back arched in strain. Then, snap! A faint, pop, but to Emily it sounded like a bell of hope. Sasha pulled her leg in a bit more, but the pain and exhaustion overwhelmed her. She collapsed slightly, her head pressing into the mud, panting heavily. Every breath was a convulsion. Emily reached out to stroke her neck, her mud-streaked hand trembling. "Just a little more," she whispered, maybe more to herself than to Sasha. The third strand was the worst. It was knotted tightly, hooking around both legs like a metal shackle. Emily tried to wedge the cutter in from one side. No gap. She tried another angle. Still nothing. Her mind swirled, her body numb. She paused, resting her head against Sasha's side, listening to her labored breaths. The smell of blood and rain clung to everything, like memories that wouldn't wash away. She thought of Sasha's eyes the first time she'd touched her forehead. Not wild, but trusting. A soul that had placed its final hope in a child. She remembered the promise. "I'll come back for you." A vow she couldn't break. She gritted her teeth, tried again. This time she pushed the blades deeper, aimed right at the center of the knot, twisted her body and pressed hard. Seconds passed. Long, unbearable seconds. Snap. The last wire gave way. Sasha collapsed, her body limp and slick with blood and rain. The bleeding worsened, but she was free. Her legs could move, barely, but freely. Emily dropped to her knees beside her, crying, wrapping her arms around Sasha's neck, pressing her cheek to the soaked, bloodied fur. "We did it," she whispered. "You're free now, Sasha. You're free." Sasha let out a deep breath, then, with what little strength she had, licked Emily's cheek. A small, exhausted lick, but one filled with meaning. In the storm, among the rusted wire and cold mud, something had been born. Not just a life, but a bond, forged in blood, tears, and the courage of a child. Emily didn't know what would come next, but one thing was certain. She would not leave Sasha again. Amid the howling wind and relentless rain, Emily huddled close to Sasha. Their small, exhausted bodies were barely specks against the vast, raging world around them. The rain fell heavier by the minute, and every beat of Emily's heart seemed to match Sasha's convulsions. Another wave of pain was coming. The first puppy now lay curled beside its mother, warm and breathing steadily. But Sasha had begun trembling again, her whole body tensed, claws scraping at the wet earth, ears flat, eyes distant, fighting something bigger than fatigue. Another contraction hit. Emily didn't just see it, she felt it. Through Sasha's breath, her quiet whimpers, and her instinct, Emily knew. Another life was about to arrive. She grabbed her backpack, pulling out the last dry towel, a tiny one wrapped carefully in a plastic bag. She moved closer. The space between the girl and the dog felt frozen. Then, a shift, a muffled groan, and a fragile, wet body slipped from Sasha, landing in the cold mud. Emily lunged. She caught the puppy, but not in time to stop its body from dipping into the dirty water. It was smaller than the first, its skin soft and cold, fur glued to flesh. It didn't move, didn't breathe. No whimper. Emily held the tiny form in shaking hands, eyes burning. But through her fear, a memory surfaced. Her mother, who was a vet, once leaned over a drowning baby squirrel. What had she done? "Dry first open the airway, use warmth," Emily muttered, almost to herself, and got to work. She placed the puppy in her palms, gently wiping it with the towel, careful not to rub too hard. Her own hands, bloodied from the wire, now left red smudges on the puppy's fur. But she didn't stop. Everything she had, every drop of energy focused on this fragile body. She wiped its face, then used her pinky finger to clear its nose and mouth. Still no movement. She leaned in, heart pounding, and blew a soft breath. Not too strong, just enough to stir something inside. Rain pounded around her. Silence filled the mud. Emily leaned closer, whispering a prayer she couldn't remember learning. "Please don't give up." One beat. Two. A tremble. A tiny twitch, like a butterfly's wing. She froze. Another twitch, then, finally, a sound. A tiny cry, a breath, a life. The puppy's mouth opened, and it let out its first shaky wail. Emily broke into sobs. She cradled the puppy, hands covered in blood and mud, her tears falling with the rain. She placed it near Sasha's muzzle. The mother, weak and drained, still lifted her head and licked the newborn. Gently, carefully, urging it to breathe, to live. Her eyes met Emily's, not just thankful, but knowing. Two trembling hands rested on Sasha and the puppy, now stained deep red. Blood from Sasha, blood from Emily, blood from effort, pain, and unshakable resolve. Her cuts bled from holding the cutters too long, too hard, with bare hands, never thinking of herself. But she hadn't let go. Not once. "I told you, I promised," she whispered, breath merging with the warmth rising from Sasha and her babies. "And I keep my promises." Above them, lightning split the sky. But no thunder could drown the spark that now glowed, not from nature, but from the heart of a child who knew that life, no matter how small, was worth everything she had. And sometimes, that is exactly what creates a miracle. Right after the miraculous moment when the second puppy let out its fragile cry, Emily didn't have time to wipe the rain from her face before she felt the urgent movement in Sasha's body. Beneath the downpour, lightning split the sky again, and thunder howled like a wild beast in revolt. The tiny 6-year-old girl crouched low, one arm cradling the newborn pups, the other gripping the heavy bolt cutters that felt too big for her hands. The blade rested on the last wire, still clinging to Sasha's wounded hind leg. Emily gritted her teeth, pouring every breath she had left into her arms. She squeezed with all her might, shoulders trembling, fingers slick with blood and rain, but holding tight, because that handle was the only thing keeping her grounded in the storm. Her vision blurred with tears, rain, fear, and resolve. Then, snap! A dry click echoed beneath the roar of the rain. The final wire broke. Sasha collapsed like a leaf falling from a tree after a long season of struggle. Emily rushed to catch her, wrapping her arms around the dog's neck and chest, gently pulling her free from the cruel wire and boiling mud. She panted, rain and tears streaming down her collar, her bloodied hand never letting go. She dragged Sasha to a small rise in the earth, laid her on the last remaining towel, already dark and soaked, but still the safest place Emily could offer. There were no applause, no witness to her bravery, only the howling wind, the freezing water slicing her face, and the thunder of a heart beating harder than it ever had. Sasha lay motionless at first, soaked, shivering, hind legs nearly numb from being suspended so long. But her eyes never left her pups, who now squirmed and whimpered in the wet towel. Emily pulled off her coat and draped it over Sasha, then curled close beside her, using her own tiny body to shield them from the storm. One arm held the pups, the other wrapped around Sasha. She had become a living shield, protecting everything fragile in that violent night. Then, a sudden spasm in Sasha's belly made Emily jump. Another contraction. Sasha gasped, legs curling, eyes wide with fresh pain. Emily understood immediately. "Another one," she whispered, and placed the last towel under Sasha's belly, hands raw and scratched, but ready. The rain seemed to fall even harder in the exact moment the third puppy arrived. A full-body contraction, a deep, wrenching cry from Sasha, and then another tiny life dropped into the soaking fabric. Emily caught it just in time. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were bright with focus. She didn't wait. She wiped away the fluid, the mud. Unlike the second pup, this one cried out almost immediately. Its legs kicked, mouth opened, and a high-pitched whine rang out, a spark of life in the deepest dark. Sasha tilted her head, licking her baby's cheek. Her eyes closed, her body shivering with exhaustion, but her instincts intact. Emily smiled through tears. She no longer felt the cold, no longer noticed the blood on her hands or her soaked clothes. In that moment, the entire world narrowed to the shallow breath of those small beings huddled in her arms. She placed the newborn beside its siblings, who were wriggling toward warmth. Under a bolt of lightning that lit up the whole sky, Emily wrapped her arms around Sasha and whispered, "You did it, Sasha. You're an incredible mom." The wind still roared, the rain still poured. But within that fragile circle of warmth, life had begun. 3 new lives, soft, tiny, but full of fire, nestled against Sasha. And Emily, standing in the storm, was no longer a lost child in a field. She was a protector, a promise keeper, a quiet gardener sowing seeds of kindness into a wild, stormy world. The storm hadn't passed, but something else had begun. A gentler storm, a storm of love, and it was already changing everything. As Emily sat beside Sasha, arms shielding the 3 puppies curled into their mother, a beam of light swept across the far woods, glinting off rain-soaked leaves. The flashlight moved slowly, cautiously, as if the one holding it was feeling their way through the dark. Emily tensed, glancing up. Her shoulders stiffened, not from fear for herself, but from the instinct to protect Sasha and the newborns. She tightened her arms around the puppies, eyes wide, locked on the approaching light. Then a deep male voice rang through the rain, not loud, but steady and clear enough to rise above the wind. "Hello? Is someone there? I'm a veterinarian. I heard a dog barking earlier. Does anyone need help?" Emily hesitated, then called out, voice hoarse from the cold and exhaustion. "Here! I'm here!" She raised her hand, then quickly turned back to Sasha, instinctively hugging her to calm her. Sasha lifted her head, ears perked, tense. But she didn't bark. She only gave a soft growl, cautious but not hostile. A man emerged from the darkness, hooded, wrapped in a heavy raincoat, holding a blinding flashlight. He froze when the light revealed the scene before him. At the base of the hill, in soaked, muddy ground, a tiny girl sat shielding a battered German shepherd covered in blood, with 3 newborn pups tucked beneath her body. The man exhaled, emotion washing over his face. He whispered, "No way, Sasha." At the sound of her name, Sasha stirred. Too weak to rise, she still lifted her head and gave a soft whimper, her cloudy eyes searching toward the voice. Her tail moved, barely, but with unmistakable feeling. A quiet whine echoed from her throat, not of pain, but recognition. "It's him," her eyes seemed to say. Emily stared at the man, then back at Sasha. She whispered, "You know him?" The man stepped closer, kneeling slowly. He removed his hood, revealing a worn face, rain-streaked, but with eyes shining from something deeper than rain. He set down his flashlight and reached out gently, like someone greeting an old friend. "Sasha, it's me, Nathan." His gaze held something more than familiarity. It was the gaze of someone finding a long-lost family member, someone whose search had stretched into hopelessness. "You called her Sasha?" Emily asked softly, still shielding the pups. "Yes." Nathan's voice cracked. "She's my dog. She was stolen 3 weeks ago from my clinic. I searched everywhere, called the police, put up flyers, but no one saw anything. I thought she was gone forever." His words hit Emily like a wave. She looked at Sasha, then back at the man. "I found her stuck in a barbed wire fence. She was hurt, about to give birth. I couldn't leave her. I stayed." Nathan was silent as Emily spoke, taking in the cuts on her hands, her soaked, blood-stained clothes, the worry etched into her young face. A child. A child had done all this alone in a storm. "You saved her. And her puppies," Nathan said softly, never taking his eyes off her. "You did something most adults wouldn't have had the courage to do." Emily looked down, embarrassed, but her eyes turned to Sasha, tender and proud. "I promised her I'd come back. I had to keep that promise." Nathan nodded. He gently placed his hand on Sasha's head. The dog closed her eyes and let out a quiet sigh, resting her head on his knee, as if the fear, the pain, The wandering was finally over. In that moment, amid the thunder and the last rain of the season, a circle closed. A dog returned home, and a little girl became the bridge to a miracle. Sasha wasn't just a rescued dog. She was a soul stolen from safety. A mother who had cried out into the void, abandoned with new life still forming inside her. And Emily, a 6-year-old girl, had been the one who refused to walk away. "You know," Nathan said, voice thick with emotion, "Sasha used to be a therapy dog. She could sense seizures in children before they happened. She saved lives. She's a real angel who went missing. But because of you, she's come back." Emily looked at Sasha differently now, not just as a creature who needed saving, but as a quiet hero who had once saved others, and now, through the unwavering heart of a child, had found her way back to the light. The headlights cut through the heavy rain, illuminating Emily's pale, worried face as she clutched a towel-lined box cradling 3 shivering puppies. After freeing Sasha from the barbed wire, Emily had used every ounce of her small strength to drag the exhausted mother dog to the roadside, where Dr. Nathan's truck waited. Sasha's breathing was shallow, her pulse faint, but her eyes still held a flicker of awareness, as if she knew the arms carrying her now were the first safe ones in weeks. Inside the truck's cabin, the air was warmer, the storm muffled behind closed doors. Nathan checked Sasha's heart rate, gently stroking her neck to keep her alert. Emily sat beside him, soaked to the bone, holding the box of pups tight. She didn't speak a word, but her eyes were full of tension, hope, fatigue, and something deeper. A silent bond formed with Sasha that no one else could quite see. By the time they arrived at the Lakeside Veterinary Clinic, night had fully fallen. The porch light still glowed, a signal of readiness for emergencies. As soon as Nathan stepped out of the truck, he called, "Rebecca, open the door! It's urgent!" Footsteps echoed quickly inside. The door swung open, revealing a woman with a tightly bound ponytail and a face lined with worry. Dr. Rebecca Carter, Emily's mother. She froze when she saw her daughter, soaked and bleeding, holding a box of newborn pups. "Emily?" she whispered, somewhere between shock and fear. "I'm okay, Mom. But it's Sasha. She needs help. She's having her puppies." Emily's voice cracked, trembling with urgency. Rebecca immediately turned to Nathan. No further explanation was needed. They moved as a team, seasoned in emergency care. Sasha was lifted onto a warm examination table. Her back, legs, and hips were cleaned and temporarily bandaged. Nathan gave a quick rundown while examining her. She was caught in barbed wire, hasn't eaten properly in days. 3 pups born, 1 more on the way. Rebecca nodded and pulled on her medical coat. She gently pulled Emily closer, checking the scratches on her daughter's hands. "You're hurt." "I'm fine, Mom," Emily replied, softly but firmly. "I have to stay. I promised Sasha." Nathan, focused on a handheld ultrasound monitor, looked up. There it is. 1 more heartbeat. The 4th puppy looked stable. Outside, the rain had eased, but thunder still rolled in the distance. Inside the warm clinic, the air was thick with anticipation. Rebecca caught the 4th pup as it was born, a fragile body, slick with blood and fluid. She gently laid it on a soft towel, dried it off, and stimulated its breathing with practiced, steady hands. Across the table, Emily held her breath, and just like the times before, a tiny miracle happened. The pup twitched, then let out a weak cry, a first breath, a first sound. Sasha lifted her head and licked her new pup, her movements slow but filled with motherly instinct. Under the bright surgical light, Rebecca turned to Emily, her voice thick with emotion. "You kept your promise. Sasha and her babies are alive because of you." Tears spilled from Emily's mud-streaked face, not from fear, but from the overwhelming joy of knowing that her small promise had blossomed into something so big, so full of life. She gently placed her hand on Sasha's head and whispered, "We did it." Nathan stepped beside them, taking Emily's hand in his. Though roughened by years of vet work, his touch was gentle. His eyes sparkled not with clinical precision, but with fatherly pride. "Emily, tonight you didn't just save a dog family. You saved a part of my heart." Rebecca, standing behind them, nodded, voice soft and full. "And maybe a future generation of therapy dogs. Sasha isn't just any dog. She's a guardian angel with a gift." Emily looked up. "She can heal people, Mom?" Rebecca glanced at Nathan, who was gently settling the 4 puppies into a warm box. He answered, voice low, proud. "She's trained to detect seizures in children, one of the few in the country. And if even one of her puppies inherits that gift, you didn't just save lives tonight. You gave hope to others who haven't even met you." Emily looked at Sasha and her pups. 4 tiny bodies curled up, breathing gently in the glow of the clinic lights. And in that warmth, she felt something sacred, an invisible thread connecting hearts, lives, and species. A thread spun from courage, love, and a single promise made on a stormy afternoon. That night, Emily fell asleep on the clinic's waiting room couch, wrapped in a soft blanket, a gentle light glowing overhead. Outside, lightning still flashed across the hills, but within her heart, the storm had long since passed, leaving behind a still lake named Unconditional Love. The next morning dawned gently, golden light pouring through the frosted clinic windows as the sounds of life slowly returned outside. Emily sat quietly beside the low bed where Sasha lay resting with her 4 newborns. Sasha had been cleaned, bandaged, hydrated, and was beginning to recover. Though weak, her eyes were bright again, clear with the intelligence and calm that had once made her one of the region's most extraordinary therapy dogs. Dr. Nathan Miller sat down beside Emily, a cold cup of coffee in hand. But his expression wasn't that of a man worn out by a long night. His eyes held something else, a pain long buried, now rising after seeing Sasha alive. He knew it was time to speak. "Emily," he began gently, meeting her gaze as she stroked Sasha's back. "There's something I need to tell you. About Sasha." Emily looked up, nodding. "She's yours, right?" "Yes. I adopted Sasha when she was just a pup, small like these. She was incredibly smart, learned fast. Not just a gentle dog, Sasha had a rare gift. She could detect seizures in children before they happened. The kids at the therapy center used to call her the angel before the storm." Nathan paused, his voice lowering. His hands tightened around the coffee cup. 3 weeks ago, my clinic was broken into. 2 pregnant dogs were taken. Sasha was one. The other, a Labrador named Molly. They targeted Sasha specifically. She's a purebred therapy dog with a perfect genetic record. Emily's eyes widened in shock and sorrow. Who took her?" Nathan was silent for a moment before answering. His voice was quiet, but weighed with truth. "Professional dog thieves. It's an underground operation. They target purebred dogs with rare traits for illegal breeding. But not to create more therapy dogs. They sell the puppies to backyard breeders, or people who just want a pretty dog. Or worse, they end up on the black market. They don't care about health, emotions, or what these animals are truly worth." Emily clenched her hand, still scarred from the wire. "Then why hang her on a fence?" Nathan swallowed. Maybe when they realized Sasha was about to give birth, they didn't want the hassle or risk. So they dumped her in a remote area near the farm. And to keep her from returning or being easily found, they tied her back legs to barbed wire. They probably thought she'd die within hours. A cold shiver ran down Emily's spine. She pictured Sasha hanging there, bleeding, pleading, caught in a storm, and herself, 6 years old, with nothing but a promise and a heart that refused to turn away. "If I hadn't found her? Then this morning," Nathan said quietly, "I'd have gotten a call from animal control saying they found a dead German shepherd, bled out and starved." Emily leaned forward, burying her face into Sasha's warm fur. Nearby, the puppies twitched in their sleep, still searching for milk. "I hate the people who did this," she whispered. Nathan placed a hand on her shoulder. Steady, warm. "So do I. But worse than losing her would have been her dying with no one knowing. You changed that. You didn't just save her family, you saved my faith in kindness. Rebecca entered with a clipboard, silently listening. She placed a hand on her daughter's other shoulder. They will be held accountable. Dr. Miller and I will work with the police, with the press, to make sure this isn't forgotten. Emily looked up. Can I help too? Rebecca smiled. You already have, by not walking away when you saw someone, something, that needed help, even if it was just a torn-up, pregnant dog hanging in the rain. Sasha stirred, nudging her nose into Emily's hand, as if to say, You did enough. And in that moment, words were no longer needed. Because some pain doesn't need explanation. Some lives don't need justification. And some heroes wear no medals. They only need a heart brave enough not to look away. As night settled outside the clinic, the warm glow from the yellow lights inside made it seem like the perfect ending to a day full of miracles. Sasha lay quietly in her soft, blanket-lined bed, her puppies stirring gently in milk-filled sleep. Emily, after a day no child could ever have imagined, had finally fallen asleep on the couch in the break room, her hand resting gently on Sasha's fur, as if to confirm that everything was real. The rain had long stopped. The sky was dark, but in everyone's heart, a soft light of hope flickered after the storm. Dr. Nathan Miller was in his office updating medical records for Sasha and her pups, while Dr. Rebecca Carter stood at the front desk, organizing emergency supplies and calling in the report to the local rescue center. No one suspected that the peace they were finally beginning to feel was just a fragile shell hiding a wave of darkness quietly rising. Suddenly, the sharp screech of tires on gravel cut through the quiet night. Rebecca looked up, alert. Nathan, did you hear that? Nathan stopped writing. His eyes narrowed with instinct. He stood up and stepped into the hallway. No emergency was scheduled for this hour. No calls had come in. The porch lights illuminated the driveway. And then he saw them. 2 dark trucks pulled up to the gate. A group of men got out. No pets, no knocking. They walked directly toward the clinic, quick, silent steps. One wore a low-brimmed hat and carried a metal rod. A chill ran down Nathan's spine. Rebecca saw it, too. They know Sasha survived, she said quietly, face pale. They've come back for her and the puppies. Without hesitation, Nathan rushed to the break room. Emily was still asleep. He knelt down and gently shook her awake. Emily, sweetie, wake up. We have to hide now. She blinked, confused by the urgency in his eyes. What's going on, doctor? Nathan? It's okay, he whispered. But you and Sasha need to go into the isolation room. It's the safest place here. Stay there with the puppies. Don't open the door for anyone but your mom or me. Rebecca had already prepared a portable crate lined with blankets in case evacuation was ever needed. But tonight, it wasn't to evacuate. It was to retreat. They led Sasha and her puppies into the isolation room at the end of the hall, a windowless chamber with thick walls and a mechanical lock, designed for treating infectious cases. It now became a sanctuary. Sasha sensed the tension. She lifted her head, growled faintly as Rebecca gently lifted the pups into the basket, then hobbled after Emily, her tail twitching every time footsteps echoed behind them. When the heavy steel door finally closed, Rebecca locked it from the outside and placed her hand on Nathan's shoulder. We just need to stall them long enough for the police to arrive, but they won't get in easily. Glass shattered in the front hall. A door had been kicked open. A man's voice echoed through the corridor. We know she's here. Bring the dog out unless you want trouble. Nathan and Rebecca exchanged a brief look. No words needed. Nathan gripped a heavy flashlight, his only weapon. Rebecca clutched her phone, fingers trembling as she dialed the police, voice low but steady as she gave their address and situation. Inside the isolation room, Emily sat curled beside Sasha, arms wrapped tightly around the crate. She could hear it. The footsteps, the crashes, the shouting. But in her small arms, Sasha nudged her chest gently, as if to reassure her. Her pups, born in storm and cradled by compassion, slept quietly between two beings who had become anchors for each other. The storm outside had passed, but the storm of human greed and cruelty still loomed. And in these moments of confrontation, there were no adults or children, only pure courage and unwavering love. A vet, a mother, a 6-year-old girl, and a wounded dog, standing together in the face of darkness to protect what was most fragile and most worth saving. The Virginia forest at night felt like a heavy blanket soaked in mist and shadow. Gusts of wind swept through the trees, carrying the scent of wet earth and rusted metal, from the same barbed fence where Sasha had once hung, caught between life and death. After the sudden attack on the clinic, Emily, her mother Dr. Rebecca Carter, veterinary assistant Maria Gonzalez, Sasha, and her 4 newborn pups had only one option left: flee through the woods behind the clinic. The back door to the isolation room groaned as it opened, revealing a narrow, pitch-dark corridor. Maria whispered urgently, "Follow me, quickly. There's a trail through the woods. It leads to an old ranger cabin. If we reach it, they won't find us." Rebecca clutched the crate of puppies, her breath quick. Emily didn't need to be told. She stepped beside Sasha, hand tightly wrapped around the makeshift leash. Every step Sasha took was a battle. Her hind legs, still braced, trembled with pain. But she didn't whimper. Her breath came hard, ears drooped with fatigue, but her eyes stayed sharp, always watching Emily, as if the girl was her last anchor to the world. The trail was nearly swallowed by leaves and vines. Moonlight only pierced through in patches. They moved in near silence, except for the sucking of feet in wet mud and the soft hiss of wind through the canopy. Emily's lips pressed tight, her hand cold but steady on Sasha's side to help balance her. Her tiny sneakers were soaked, pants caked in mud, but she never stopped. Blood still speckled Sasha's fur, the wounds not yet healed, but she lowered her head and moved in rhythm with Emily's breath, as if her strength came from the child beside her. When she stumbled or froze from pain, Emily knelt, whispered, "You've got this, Sasha. We just need to make it to the cabin, then I'll help you rest." Rebecca glanced back constantly, alert as both mother and veterinarian. "Maria, how far?" "Almost there," Maria panted. She stopped at a slight incline, raising her hand for silence. Ahead, faint flashlight beams flickered, moving toward the clinic. "They're still searching. If they track Sasha's footprints, we don't have long." Then, a soft whimper came from the puppy crate. Emily turned to her mother. "They're cold, Mom. I heard one cry." Rebecca checked quickly. "They're okay. Just need more warmth. Keep moving. We'll stop when we're safe." Sasha was faltering now, limping heavily, pausing often to gasp for breath. Without hesitation, Emily took both her front legs, stepping backward gently to help her climb the slope. "Don't give up. Your babies need you." A soft rain began again, accentuating the ordeal. Dead branches snapped underfoot, owls hooted in the distance. Every sound set nerves on edge, but none of them dared stop. They knew if caught, Sasha and her pups could be taken, or worse. Finally, through the haze and branches, the ranger cabin appeared. An old stone structure with a rotting wooden door, but sturdy enough to hide in. Rebecca and Maria rushed to the stone step, unlocking it with a key hidden under a flat rock. A trick passed down from an old forest warden. Inside, the cabin was cold and dusty, but dry. Rebecca lit a fire in the old hearth while Maria spread a moth-eaten quilt across the floor. Emily helped Sasha lie down gently, covering her with towels. Then she brought over the crate, placing the puppies close to her side. Exhausted, Sasha still lifted her head, licking each pup to make sure they were safe. Emily sat beside her, arms wrapped around her neck. "You're safe now, Sasha. Your babies too. We kept our promise." 3 women, a child, a doctor, a veterinary assistant, gathered around the exhausted but noble mother. In that small, crumbling cabin, deep in the woods, with wind hissing through the trees like a distant warning, they had built a fortress, not of walls, but of love and resolve. Sasha looked up at Emily. In those deep brown eyes, lit by the flickering fire, there was no more fear, only something quieter. Gratitude. Emily smiled through the mud and the dark. The night, the danger, none of it mattered now. What mattered was the warmth of Sasha and her puppies, and a promise kept. A promise that had turned a child into the fiercest guardian the forest had ever seen. The small curtain in the wooden cabin fluttered in the early morning breeze, carrying the damp chill of the deep forest after the storm. Emily clutched Hero, the tiniest puppy, barely a day old, his small body trembling with each breath. Yet, amidst the seeming tranquility, an unease stirred within her. The room was too quiet. So quiet that every minor sound outside, the rustling leaves, the snapping twigs, even distant dog barks, was distinctly audible. Maria stood by the small window, gently lifting the curtain, her deep eyes scanning the fading darkness in the dim light. Her face suddenly tensed. "They're back," she whispered. Rebecca quickly rose, her gaze sharp. "They're scouring the forest. They won't give up." Maria nodded, her voice anxious. "And this time they've brought tracking dogs." Emily felt her heart sink. She looked at Hero, then at Sasha, the mother dog still lying on the large blanket, her 4 legs weak, body bloodied, but eyes alert. She sensed the tension in Sasha's breathing, her ears perked, nose twitching with each breeze. "They're getting closer," Maria said, lips pressed tightly. "I hear footsteps and barking." "We must act, now," Rebecca urged. "If they find this place, not only Sasha and her pups, but Emily will be in danger." The atmosphere inside thickened. Then something unexpected happened. Hero, the smallest, weakest puppy, presumed too young to comprehend, suddenly lifted his head. His tiny ears quivered, and then, in the stillness, a bark rang out, high-pitched, small but sharp and resolute. Everyone froze. Maria moved to intervene, but Rebecca shook her head. "Wait, it seems the little one knows what he's doing." Hero barked again, a second, then a third time. The sounds were faint, but in this setting they echoed like alarm signals. Strangely, moments later, the external noises began to shift. Barking echoed from another edge of the forest. Footsteps dispersed. Muffled voices hurriedly whispered. Maria pressed her ear to the wooden door. A fleeting smile appeared. "They're changing direction. They think the trail leads the other way." Rebecca exhaled in relief, but kept her eyes on Hero. "You've performed a miracle, Hero. You not only sensed danger, you knew how to protect." Emily hugged Hero tightly to her chest, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. She whispered, "You're not just a little puppy. You're a true hero." Sasha strained to lift her head, then extended her neck to gently lick Hero's forehead. A tender gesture, as if acknowledging that her youngest, though smallest, possessed the strongest heart. In the small cabin amidst the deep forest, something had changed. Not just the escape, but a silent recognition. Hero, the newborn puppy, had stepped beyond the role of a mere infant to become a beacon, a sentinel, the youngest warrior in the night. Maria spoke softly. "We'll wait a few more hours, just in case they return. But I believe. Hero just saved all our lives." Rebecca sat beside Emily and Sasha, gently stroking Hero's still damp fur, her gaze fixed on his innocent face. "You've planted a seed of courage into this world, little one, and that seed will grow into an oak tree no one anticipated." In Emily's embrace, Hero emitted a soft growl, unclear whether in response to the words or merely a warm dream, but in everyone's hearts a truth was etched. Hero wasn't an anonymous puppy. Hero was the first symbol of hope, and his extraordinary journey had only just begun. As dawn's light began to filter through the dense foliage, the weary group finally reached an old stone house nestled deep within the forest. Constructed from moss-covered gray stones and a slanted wooden roof, the house seemed to emerge from a distant memory, both familiar and sacred. Rebecca recognized the place first, her eyes reflecting an emotion Emily hadn't seen in her mother for a long time. "This is where your father lived as a child, when he was an orphan raised by his great-grandfather," Rebecca whispered, pushing open the heavy old wooden door. A layer of dust rose in the golden morning light, yet the interior still retained a hint of warmth from past winters, as if the house had silently awaited the return of lost souls. Maria set down the fabric box on the wooden floor, where the 4 puppies, including Hero, nestled close to Sasha, wrapped in clean, dry towels. Rebecca quickly kindled a small fire using dry wood collected along the way, the flames gradually spreading warmth and soft light throughout the simple room, offering the first sense of safety after a perilous night. Emily sat beside Sasha, gently placing her hand on the mother dog's belly, where life continued to beat with fragile yet strong rhythms. Sasha tilted her head, resting her cheek on the girl's thigh, her eyes filled with trust and gratitude. In the flickering firelight, all remained silent, not from exhaustion, but from a deeper realization: the sanctity of this moment. After making sure everyone was safe, Rebecca poured warm water into a small cup and handed it to Emily. Then she sat down beside her daughter, her voice turning low and steady. "Do you know why I've always taught you to love and respect dogs?" Emily looked up at her mother, her eyes blinking softly in curiosity. "I've never told you the story about your father, have I?" Rebecca gave a bittersweet smile, then turned her gaze to the flickering fire. Back when he was a firefighter during a warehouse blaze, a beam collapsed on him. The fire spread fast, and no one realized he was trapped, except for a service dog named Max. Max ran back inside, leading the team to him. Without that dog, your dad wouldn't have survived. Emily was speechless. For the first time, she truly felt the depth behind all her mother's stories about rescue dogs. That love for them wasn't just theory, but forged from fire, blood, and things that once seemed impossible. "After that day," Rebecca continued, her eyes glistening, "your father said something I've never forgotten. Dogs don't just save lives, they remind us that loyalty and courage always exist if we learn to see with our hearts." Emily held Hero close, whispering into his tiny ear, as if sending a sacred vow. "I'll grow up like Max. Just like Dad was saved, I'll learn how to save others too." Sasha lifted her head and gently licked Emily's hand, not just by instinct, but like a quiet nod of agreement. Perhaps in that moment, in the soft firelight, the mother dog could sense the miraculous thread of fate binding together 3 generations: a father once saved by a dog, and a daughter who just saved a whole newborn litter. After a pause, Maria softly spoke. "It's strange, isn't it? This house feels like it was built to shelter brave souls, not just from danger, but to help them rediscover the meaning of faith." Rebecca nodded, her eyes turning toward Hero, now curled up next to Sasha, both of them dozing in peace. "And maybe it's also the beginning of something new. These lives aren't just survivors. They've been given the chance to change the world around them." In that old stone house hidden deep in the forest, the fire still burned, the eyes still glowed, and love quietly spread with every breath. No one said another word, but they all knew. They had just stepped into an entirely new chapter of this journey, where even the smallest things could kindle hope in hearts once torn apart. The fragile morning light filtered through the leaves, casting pale bands of peace across the damp forest floor. Inside the old stone cabin, hidden deep in the woods, once belonging to Emily's great-grandfather, everything was eerily still. Only the soft breathing of newborn pups and the faint whimpering of an exhausted Sasha filled the misty air. Emily curled up on an old blanket, eyes half closed, unable to sleep. Each time her eyelids drooped, she saw Sasha's terrified eyes when the intruders stormed in, heard Hero's frantic barking, and relived the cold, rain-soaked flight through the woods, all for the sake of a mother dog and her not-yet-seeing newborns. A soft knock on the wooden door startled her. She instinctively turned toward Sasha. The mother dog was still lying down, but her ears had perked up, body tense. Rebecca placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, signaling her to stay silent. Their eyes met, a tiny nod, and then Rebecca slowly stepped toward the door. "It's me, Maria," came a hushed voice. "It's over, we're safe." Rebecca exhaled in relief and unlatched the door. Maria stepped in, soaked with morning dew, face drawn but eyes bright. In her hand, a small flashlight blinked weakly, its battery nearly dead, but nothing could dim the calm smile on her face. "Good news," Maria said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Jake and Grandma Margaret are safe. The police got there in time. They've arrested all 3 intruders." Emily sprang from the blanket, eyes wide with hope. "Grandma's okay? Did they hurt her?" Maria smiled, admiration lighting her features. "Not only is she okay, your grandma did something that the whole police department will probably talk about for years." She paused, as if carefully choosing the right words to honor the moment. "When one of them forced Jake to unlock the medical supply room and isolation ward, your grandma stepped in, completely unfazed. She said, and I remember every word, 'I've raised 3 kids, lived through a war, cooked porridge for 27 mangy dogs at the rescue shelter, and I'm still standing. You think some bleach-haired guy with a toy gun can scare me?'" Rebecca blinked, then burst out laughing. "Oh my God, my mother!" Maria laughed too, but her chuckle quickly shifted into a look of deep respect. Then she swung her handbag, that old moss-green one loaded with biscuits and knitting needles, straight at his forehead. Boom! He hit the floor before he even knew what happened. Emily stared in awe. She had never imagined her grandmother, the same woman who scolded her for dirty shoes or sneaking puppies into the kitchen, could be a hero. "You know what else?" Maria added. She calmly tied him up with elastic bands, then called the police. When they arrived, she'd already made tea. 1 cup for Jake, 1 for the police chief. Rebecca shook her head, caught between disbelief and pride. "My mother is the living definition of never underestimate a grandma." Emily laughed out loud, her face lit with joy. "She's like a movie hero, like a superhero. She saved Jake." Maria nodded, her tone more serious now. "She did. Jake's resting at the clinic now, just a few scrapes, nothing serious. And thanks to Sasha and to you, the police are now investigating the entire illegal breeding ring." Rebecca squeezed Emily's hand tightly, eyes brimming with pride. Sasha stirred and gently licked Emily's fingers, an act of gratitude, and nudged her pups closer to the little girl who helped bring them into the world. "You kept your promise?" Rebecca whispered, her voice trembling. "Not just kept it," Maria murmured. "You changed the course of lives." For a long moment, silence filled the small stone cabin. It was just another morning, but one that carried the weight of hope reborn. Strangers who once had nothing in common were now bound by a promise. Between a girl and a suffering dog, hung on a wire fence in a storm. Now, they weren't fugitives. They were a family, each bearing a unique piece of a puzzle shaped by compassion, courage, and the miracle of unconditional love for animals. Emily stood up and walked to the door. Sunlight now spilled across the path back to the clinic. She knew the road ahead would be long. The puppies were still fragile. Life would test them. But today, as she watched the light dance over Sasha's damp fur and listened to the delicate breaths of the pups, Emily understood. This journey had already seen its first victory, and the promise she once made had now become a mission she could never walk away from. As the soft morning sunlight filtered through the trees, the group left the old stone cabin, a haven of warmth amidst danger, and made their way back to the veterinary clinic. The path home felt sacred, almost ceremonial. There was no more chasing, no more fear pressing down on their chests. Just calm footsteps, accompanied by Emily's gentle chatter with the puppies nestled in a warm cloth against her chest. Sasha walked slowly but steadily beside Emily, still limping from her injuries, yet her deep brown eyes held something new, a flicker of life rekindled. The weakness that once consumed her had now given way to something far stronger, the instinct of a mother and a love born from a promise. "I'll come back for you." When they arrived at the clinic, everyone was waiting. Jake, the brave technician who had survived a harrowing night, embraced Emily tightly as cheers erupted. Grandma Margaret rushed in from behind, her wrinkled arms wrapping around her granddaughter, crying without words. No one scolded Emily for her reckless decision. Everyone understood. That very act of boldness had saved not one, but 5 lives. Sasha was immediately taken to the emergency room. Rebecca and Dr. Miller, assisted by the nurses, began carefully removing the last bits of barbed wire from her belly and legs. The dried blood clung to her thick fur, tangled with mud and rainwater. But Sasha no longer whimpered. She lay still, her eyes glancing through the glass toward Emily, as if to say, "I'm here, I'm alive, I'm not going anywhere." The puppies, named Hope, Scout, Luna, and Hero, were miraculously healthy. Each was cleaned, warmed, and given initial vaccinations. Their tiny, trembling bodies now squirmed eagerly toward their mother for milk. Maria couldn't hold back tears watching them fight to live. Sasha's story spread like summer wind. Within a day, photos of Emily cradling Hero in the forest rain, or of Sasha tangled in barbed wire, filled social media. People everywhere couldn't believe a 6-year-old girl had single-handedly carried out such a courageous act. The media came flooding in. Local news stations, reporters, even a national news outlet arrived to interview Emily. They were captivated not just by her bravery, but by the sacred bond between the little girl and the mother dog. One photo, Emily with her hand resting on Sasha's forehead, their eyes locked in silent understanding, touched millions. At first, Rebecca was wary of the attention, but soon she understood. This wasn't just about their family anymore. It had become a symbol, a reminder amid the chaos of life that compassion, even from the smallest heart, could shake the world. Even after her emergency surgery, Sasha would lift her head every time she heard Emily's voice outside the room. Though weak, her eyes followed the pups as they were carried away for checkups, only resting when they were safely returned to nestle into her side. One afternoon, as golden sunlight bathed the clinic hallway, a letter arrived. It was from the National Animal Protection Association. They expressed deep gratitude for Emily's heroic act and offered her the title Rescue Hero Jr., an award for young individuals who save animals in urgent, life-threatening circumstances. The letter ended with a handwritten line. "Perhaps we don't need to wait for someone to grow up to do great things. Sometimes it begins with a small heart that knows how to love." On award day, Emily wore a blue dress with puppies printed on it, holding Hero in her arms. Sasha sat quietly by her side, her face calm, as if she knew this moment belonged to Emily, the child who saw the worth in a life the world had nearly left behind. The story of Sasha and Emily didn't fade like a passing headline. It became a spark for animal welfare groups, for classrooms teaching kindness, and for thousands facing the question of whether to help or walk away from a being in need. As the sun dipped low, Sasha drifted to sleep beside her puppies. Emily laid her cheek against Sasha's back, not wanting to move. She whispered, just loud enough for Sasha to hear, "I kept my promise, and Sasha, we're only just getting started." It was no longer a promise. It was a miracle born from the smallest belief that in a world often cold, a trusting gaze and a hand that reaches back can change everything. Once Sasha's health stabilized and the puppies grew stronger, a special medical evaluation was conducted by experts from the National Assistance Dog Training Center. News that Sasha had once been a seizure detection dog, a rare and highly trained breed, sparked excitement throughout the center. They promptly sent specialists to assess the newborn puppies to determine if any inherited their mother's exceptional traits. Emily stood outside the examination room, her eyes filled with anticipation and worry. She had grown accustomed to cradling each puppy every morning, brushing their fur with a tiny comb, and calling them by name as if they were her closest friends. Hope, the only girl with ivory fur and bright brown eyes. Scout, quick, intelligent, and always the leader. Luna, gentle and observant. And finally, Hero, the smallest, yet the only one who expressed emotions through playful antics, clinging to Emily whenever someone else approached. The evaluation lasted a week. Experts observed each puppy's reactions to unfamiliar sounds, their responses to specific physiological signals from humans, their focus, and scent sensitivity. The results showed that Hope, Scout, and Luna all exhibited exceptional abilities, particularly in detecting changes in heart rate and neurological states in children, indicating their potential to become invaluable assistance dogs. Emily received the news with mixed feelings of joy and sadness. She knew that being selected for training was a wonderful opportunity. It meant that the puppies she had cherished daily would soon leave her, but they would go on to help other children, just as Sasha once did. Grandma Margaret embraced her gently, saying, "Not all farewells are endings. Sometimes they're the beginning of something much greater." As for Hero, despite being intelligent and emotionally expressive, he was too attached to Emily. He followed her everywhere, from the kitchen to her bed. When trainers called him, Hero didn't respond. But when Emily softly called his name, he immediately ran to her, nestled into her arms, and nuzzled her wrist as if to affirm, "I'm here, and I'm yours alone." Rebecca smiled and softly said to Dr. Miller, "Perhaps Hero wasn't born to serve a stranger. Maybe he was meant to stay with Emily, the one who first saved his life." Dr. Miller nodded. In all his years of practice, he had never witnessed such a swift, strong, and sincere bond between a human and a dog. One breezy afternoon, Emily sat on the porch with Hero, who held a tiny lavender sprig in his mouth as a gift. She gently stroked his back, whispering as if confiding in an old friend, "Your sisters will go to school to help others, Hero. But you'll stay with me, won't you?" Hero let out a soft whimper, then rested his head on Emily's knee, as if confirming that this was indeed the unchangeable truth. On the day the puppies departed for training, Emily prepared small towels, embroidering each with their names in colored thread. She wrote letters to their future caregivers, detailing each puppy's personality, preferences, and quirky habits. Hope liked ear scratches, Luna feared vacuum cleaners, and Scout enjoyed chewing on soft shoes. As for Hero, he remained an inseparable part of Emily. The farewell was tearless, filled instead with hope. There were waves, hugs, and silent promises of reunion. Emily knew that every creature carrying courage and love, even the smallest, would find their path. For the three puppies, that path led to children in need. For Hero, it was the path of the heart. That night, lying beside Hero under the soft glow of the nightlight, Emily whispered, "We've kept our promise, haven't we? But I think our adventure is just beginning." And indeed, somewhere in the world, stories of hope, life, and friendship continue to be written by small hands and hearts that never give up. From the moment the three puppies were selected for the training program for children with epilepsy, Emily understood it was part of Sasha's mission, and also the unfulfilled dream of Dr. Miller. Yet, her young heart was drawn to one being, Hero, the smallest, most delicate yet bravest puppy. Hero wasn't as obedient as his siblings. He was always the first to crawl out of the nest, stumble, then get back up. He licked Emily's hands the most, demanded the most cuddles, and barked the loudest whenever she left the room. When trainers attempted to involve him in response exercises, Hero ignored the bell and ran straight to Emily, wagging his tail vigorously as if to declare, "I only need to be with you." Emily saw this, and realized that perhaps Hero wasn't destined to guide or detect seizures. But in her world, Hero was accomplishing even more. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees at the back of the farm, Emily sat on the porch, holding Hero in her arms. The wind tousled her messy hair, carrying the light scent of dried lavender that Grandma Margaret hung in the kitchen. Hero lay quietly, his head resting on Emily's knee, occasionally wagging his tail gently whenever she stroked his back. "I want to keep Hero, Mom," Emily said softly and earnestly. "I know Hero can't be a service dog, but he's become my friend. I need Hero, just as Hero once needed me." Rebecca looked at her daughter for a long moment, her eyes no longer those of a veterinarian, but of a mother witnessing her child grow up, with a heart full of love and an unusual sense of responsibility. "Keeping a dog isn't just about playing, Emily," she said slowly. "It's about cleaning up, training, being patient, and taking responsibility when he's sick, when he misbehaves, when he's sad. Are you sure?" Emily nodded immediately, her eyes shining. "I've read the entire dog training manual you gave me. I even took my notes. I've saved my allowance to buy a leash and collar for Hero. I even made a wooden name tag. I promise I'll do everything the best I can." Jake, who was fixing the back gate at the time, overheard and approached, a gentle smile on his face. "You know, Emily, not every dog is born to be a service dog, and that doesn't make them any less. Some dogs aren't meant to serve, but to heal. And Hero, this little guy, has healed the hearts of everyone in our clinic, just by being himself." Rebecca smiled. "I agree on one condition. If, during the next evaluation, Hero doesn't meet the criteria to be a therapy dog, then you'll officially become his caretaker. But from now until then, you must take responsibility every day as if Hero is already yours. We'll monitor the process together, okay?" Emily jumped up, hugging her mother, tears welling in her eyes from emotion. "Thank you, Mom. I promise I won't let you down. Hero and I will be a team, never apart again." The next day, Emily and Hero went to Jake's clinic. Jake handed her a small wooden box. "For you?" he said warmly. "A special gift for a special person." Emily opened the box. Inside was a handcrafted leather collar, intricately engraved with small leaves encircling it. In the center was a metal plate inscribed with 2 lines, "Hero, born to heal with courage and loyalty." Emily stood still for a moment, then leaned down and gently fastened the collar around Hero's neck. It fit perfectly, like it had been made just for him. From that day on, Hero was no longer an unnamed pup among tests and evaluations. He became an inseparable part of Emily's life. From morning walks around the farm to quiet nights curled up together, listening to bedtime stories. Every step Hero took echoed like the heartbeat of a friendship that could never be replaced. And for Emily, that small dream had finally come true, not through applause from crowds or shiny medals, but through Hero's loyal gaze, the warmth of a life she had saved, and the enduring love between 2 souls who found each other in the middle of a storm. Ever since the day Hero wore the collar engraved with his name, mornings at the Carter farm seemed brighter. 6 months had passed with gentle but profound changes. Emily was no longer the clumsy little girl driven by bursts of courage. She had grown into a true companion to Hero, their bond forged through trials and deep understanding. Hero was officially adopted on a sunny March morning during a certificate ceremony held by the training center. Emily wore the floral dress her grandmother, Margaret, had sewn especially for the occasion, and Hero once again wore the collar engraved with "Born to Heal," the one Jake had gifted him. Rebecca embraced her 2 extraordinary kids, unable to hide her emotion. Everyone present knew this wasn't just a formality. It was a recognition of a journey where love had made the impossible real. Sasha, Hero's mother, had fully recovered from her injuries. Her coat shone once more, and the sadness that used to cloud her eyes had given way to calm serenity. Dr. Miller kept Sasha at the clinic as an honorary partner, where she quietly comforted young patients undergoing treatment. Some afternoons, she would lie beside a child hooked up to an IV, breathing steadily and warmly, offering silent solace. People said she was the gentle wind that soothed the storm inside children's hearts. Then came something truly special. The first fundraiser organized by Emily, with support from her mom, Dr. Miller, and Grandma Margaret. The event was called Paws of Promise. It wasn't just a charity auction or donation drive. It was a message that every dog given a chance, every child given a companion, could help make the world better. Emily stood on stage in a soft yellow spotlight, her voice trembling slightly but her eyes glowing. Behind her sat Hero, quietly alert, head tilted as if listening to every word. "I was just a 6-year-old girl when I met Hero and his mom, Sasha," Emily began, her voice full of emotion. "I didn't think I could do anything big. I just promised I'd come back, and I kept that promise. But in the end, it was Hero who held on to me. He kept me from being afraid, from giving up, and he helped me believe that anyone, even a little puppy, can make a miracle happen." The crowd was silent. No one spoke, but more than a few quietly wiped away tears. In the front row, Jake nodded slowly, his eyes filled with quiet pride. At the close of the program, Rebecca stepped onto the stage, hugged her daughter, and bowed her head to the audience. "We used to believe we were rescuing dogs, but today I understand. They are the silent saviors of humanity, and it's the hearts of children like Emily where the greatest compassion begins." After the fundraiser, the amount raised was enough to open 2 additional training facilities in rural areas where children with disabilities still lacked access to support. Even more, Paws of Promise became a viral campaign, attracting thousands of volunteers and foster families for potential service dogs. As the sun dipped low behind the trees, Emily and Hero sat quietly on a wooden bench behind the farm. Hero rested his head on her lap, as always, ears twitching slightly as the spring breeze rustled the leaves. Emily whispered, "We have a new family now, Hero." And Hero didn't respond with words, but his gentle tail wag was the perfect silent punctuation to all the storms they had survived together. A journey was nearing its end, and at the same time, a door had opened to a future full of hope, where small, 4-legged footprints would continue to plant love across every path they walked. That afternoon, the sky turned a soft orange, like a silk curtain gently descending over a windless landscape. Emily sat on the old wooden bench behind the house, the spot where she often read stories to Hero at the end of the day. Hero rested his head on her lap, eyes half closed in peace, while Sasha, now a seasoned and serene mother, curled up beside the porch steps, sleeping among the white daisies Grandma Margaret had just replanted. The world felt still, yet within that quiet flowed a deep and steady current of emotion, warm, gentle, and reaching to the heart's core. Emily placed her hand on Hero's soft fur, feeling the rhythm of his breath, the warmth seeping into her skin like an unspoken whisper. She didn't need to ask Hero anything. His eyes had already answered, "I'm here, always." Beneath that fur was the heart of a dog who had dared to bark into the darkness to save them all, and now he was Emily's first true friend, the only one she trusted completely in both her quietest and brightest moments. She lifted her gaze toward the tree line, the hill that had once been a place of fear and mystery, now the very beginning of everything magical. "Mom says dogs can't speak human words," she whispered to Hero, "but I think if we listen deeply enough, we'll hear everything they're trying to say." Sasha stirred, her ears twitching. She had endured pain, betrayal, and near death, but she had chosen to trust a 6-year-old girl. That choice had changed the course of not just her life, but the lives of 2 species. The golden-orange light danced across her gray coat, making her look like a warrior at rest after a long, wounded journey, one filled with hope. Emily thought quietly, "Every dog is a miracle, if we're brave enough to hear their call for help." It wasn't just the thought of a child. It was the quiet truth of a soul learning to see the world through eyes that love unconditionally. The wind chime on the porch rang softly, carrying the scent of vanilla and the familiar footsteps of her mother. Rebecca approached, wrapping her arms around both her daughter and the small dog nestled at her side, an embrace that softly swept away the last of their shared wounds. No words were needed. Some forms of love are fluent without speaking. In the distance, Jake and Grandma Margaret were mounting a new sign over the front gate: Paws of Promise Sanctuary. No longer just a haven for dogs in need of healing, it had become a home for people searching for something gentler they thought they had lost to life's rush. Hero lifted his head and gave a soft bark, tail wagging, not out of fear or excitement, but as if to say, "We're okay now." And so the story paused there, not with a final scene, nor a swelling soundtrack, nor a fading "the end," because beautiful things don't need endings. They just need to keep living, in the hearts that listen, the hands that reach out, and the tiny paw prints that leave hope behind wherever they go. One journey had come to a close, but it opened the door to countless more, where dogs like Sasha and Hero would keep teaching the world one simple truth: to be someone's miracle, sometimes all it takes is to show up, stay true, and never give up. The story of Emily, Sasha, and Hero isn't just a tale of rescue. It's a poignant reminder that compassion, no matter how small, can spark extraordinary change. From a pleading look through a fence of barbed wire to the warmth of a newborn pup during a storm. Each moment carved out a message of love, courage, and the magical connection between humans and animals. Have you ever experienced a moment with your pet that changed the way you see them? Or yourself? We'd love to hear it. Share your story in the comments below. Who knows? Your words might reach someone out there who needs healing too. If this journey touched your heart, please share this video to spread the kindness, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of what truly matters. And always remember, sometimes a lost dog is the one who lights the path to bring your heart home.